firstly, obviously we all want always a firefight, don't we? And after 3 or 4 rounds, I'm kind of thinking, oh God, this is cagey. I mean, I don't mind watching fights like that because I find it quite fascinating. But obviously you got however many 8,000, 9,000 in there just want to tear up. And all of a sudden the knockdown comes, was it the 5th? Or it starts to get a bit juicier in the 5th. The knockdown comes and it changes the trajectory of the fight. And actually probably at the halfway stage, I had it very close. Might have even had Regis just edging it with a knockdown. And then all of a sudden, Jack just changed the fight. And I think that, that switched up the excitement levels. You could see how heavy-handed Regis was even early in the fight. And I think that got Jack's attention. And he had to be switched on. Obviously, the knockdowns came in the 9th. He won 10, 11, 12. I think he won 8 as well. And you've got to give a lot of respect to Regis because he was badly hurt. He turned his ankle over. He could hardly walk in the last couple of rounds and just never stopped trying. And he said after, this is the best guy I've ever fought by a mile. And I think Jack Catterall is one of the most underrated fighters in the world. I think sometimes the style, to the sort of casual eye, they don't necessarily realise how good he is because he doesn't scream and shout and he doesn't, it's a bit like Liam Paro. I think Liam Paro is a sensational fighter. But just because he don't scream and shout and backflip here and do all this kind of stuff. And, with regards to TEOFIMO LOPEZ, like I said, we'd love to spank him. But he's a very good fighter. And he's a massive star. And I doubt he would come to Manchester. But it'd be some night, wouldn't it? God, imagine bringing TEOFIMO LOPEZ to the UK. It'd be brilliant. And, that was a WBO international. Jack is sitting at number 2. I think hopefully it's going to move him closer to that number 1 position. And who knows what TEOFIMO is going to do. I see him probably moving up to 147. He's got the legal dispute with Top Rank. Maybe Jack fights the winner of Barboza against Ramirez for the vacant title. But we do have 2 guys fighting for the IBF world title on December the 7th in Liam Paro and Richardson Hitchens. So, can we bring that world championship fight here? Obviously, Liam Paro is going to say, well, what about Australia? Which is something that we'll look at as well. If Hitchens wins, he's going to say, what about New York? Which is something we'd look at as well. So Jack's in a great position. But when you look at his 11 months in Linares, Taylor, Prograis, all headline fights, he really does deserve his shot.
Tom Ivor's boxing scene. Just wanted to ask you about Campbell Hatton. Obviously, it's 2 defeats in a row to Flint now and kind of at that English title level. Where does he go from here now?
I think that it's difficult because he's very young. So, like, if the guy was 29, 30, you'd say maybe that's your lot. But when you're enjoying what you do, and I think right now, Campbell Hatton's level is area and English title level. That's no disgrace. A lot of fighters don't even reach that level. But obviously, with our stable and where we're looking to take fighters, we don't really work with and kind of continuously back after back-to-back defeats, area title and English level fighters. Campbell's a little bit different. 1, because he's a really good kid. 2, because he works his nuts off. And 2, because he's given us back-to-back brilliant fights. And he's still young. So Campbell's got to look at himself and say, if that's my level, am I happy to continue? And if he's happy to continue, he should absolutely continue. Whether that's to go and get a couple of fights on, smaller shows and without the pressure of the... I mean, he ends up being co-main event tonight, again, in front of like 8,000. It's not easy. And a lot of people thought he won the fight. I went in the changing room after and I said to Ricky Hatton, Ricky thought he edged the fight. And I said, in my opinion, I thought you lost 6-4. But I'm going to give you my honest opinion. But when it's 6-4, it can go either way. But, again, he gave us a brilliant fight, but he just wasn't good enough. And he's not really progressing. The performance wasn't really much better, in my opinion, than the last performance. But he's young, and if he's enjoying the game and wants to stay at it, then he absolutely should.
Hi, Eddie. Regan Slaymaker for International Boxing News. Were the scorecards... Right, man, one for me tonight, but were the scorecards a little too wide in Jack's favour tonight? Yeah,
I think so. I think one was particularly... I can't really remember, but I had Regis Prograis winning 2 rounds plus the knockdown round. So a 10-8 round, and I think the first and then was the knockdown the 5th or the 6th? 5th. So the 5th round, the 1st round, and one more. I think it was 7 or something like that. So again, obviously it was a 10-7 round. Jack won 10-11-12, obviously. I think 9 was the 10-7. Thought he won 8. I thought it was the 7, I think Regis won. Jack, I thought, won the round after the knockdown, which was the 6th. So you tell me what's the score if it's 10-8 and 2 rounds. Don't know. Someone tell me. But yes, I thought one of the cards was particularly wide.
Jolie here for Hooked Boxing. Eddie, do you think it will be tough, difficult to match Jack? Because, like you say, he's not necessarily jumping around at press conferences, but he is so good. Like, for example, TEOFIMO Lopez. Do you think it will be difficult to make those fights?
Yeah, I think that it will be more difficult to make because he's very good. Do you know what I mean? But if you look at tonight, if you look at the atmosphere, that was all of our first times. I loved it. I thought it was really good. Imagine when we fill it up, the atmosphere in here will be unbelievable. So that was a good crowd tonight. Like you're not really outside of AJ and outside of Fury and those kind of guys. When are you seeing, like, don't forget the last fight against Taylor, he did virtually 11,000 in Leeds. Over 8,000 tonight. Like, it's solid numbers. So a TEOFIMO Lopez fight would fill up this place. So it's really all about money. I mean, if Liam Paro wins, he won the world title in Puerto Rico. He's defending it in Puerto Rico. He's probably going to say, hang on a minute, I want to go back to Australia and fight. And Jack would go. If Richardson wins, he's probably going to say, I want to defend in New York. And Jack would go. But maybe we come up with a number to tempt him to come here. Because he's selling the tickets.
Eddie, Adam here at RTF. Hi. I just want to mention the crowd tonight, the first event in the Co-op Arena. We've had many, many nights in Manchester Arena, the likes of Ricky and Anthony Crolla. Do you think Jack Catterall can make this place a little bit of a fortress over the next couple of years? Because the fans really take to him. He's a lovely guy, as well as obviously having had those great results in the last year.
Yeah, that's what I said, after the fight in the ring. Just a really good bloke. And sometimes the Josh Taylor fight allowed him to show that little bit of spite because they hated each other. But, with Regis, it's like they just respected each other. And when you bring them together, you're kind of looking for something. But in the end, you just let Jack be Jack. And that's the great thing about him, is he's very real. He's a real family man. He's a real fighter. He'll fight anyone. And, yeah, I think, like, let's be honest, what other fighters from this area are going to drive those kind of numbers in there tonight and beyond? The only people that are going to make bigger crowds than Jack Catterall here are the marquee fights. Eubank Ben, AJ, Fury. They're the ones that are going to fill this place up. But, as you remember with Crolla, we started with 5,000. Then we went to 7. Then we went to 8. Then we went to 10. And I think Jack's on the same path. Yeah, it was the most bizarre and unique situation I think I've ever seen. I mean, we were sitting at ringside and Dennis Gilmartin called Frank Smith and said, can you and Eddie come backstage ASAP? And we were like, oh shit, that's really bad news, because Dennis would never say that to me. So straight away, there's a problem with a fighter. So Frank Smith went back. He sat with the doctors. When Michael Gomez arrived in the changing room, he fell ill, and he was sort of bent over in pain. The doctors looked at him. They ran some tests. I believe they took a urine sample and did some checks on that sample quickly. And they decided that he had an infection and he wasn't fit to fight. And, at that point, you kind of like, what? Are you sure? It's like, no, it's off, mate. They've completely ruled him out. They said there's no way he can fight. And I've never known it an hour before the fight, to be honest with you. And Reece Bellotti was, quite a epic DAZN interview where he thinks that Michael Gomez swallowed it. I'm not, I don't believe a fighter would swallow it an hour before the fight, having trained for 10 weeks and not getting paid and turned up at the venue. But it's a really weird one. And once the British Boxing Board of Control say, our doctors say he is not fit to fight, there's no way back. But obviously disappointed for Reece. We'll get him another fight ASAP and see what happens with Michael Gomez.
October Red here. Good evening, Eddie. Lovely evening in Manchester. Successful. A lively crowd. Are you going to start to put more shows on in the UK? You could hear the crowd. They were hungry for it. They were there. They were passionate. We want to see more fights from Matchroom in the UK. Is that something that you're looking to do in 2025?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I had a good meeting with DAZN at the end of last week, and the strategy is definitely to do more UK shows in 2025. I think, we've got a nice finish with Catterall Prograis and Edwards against Yafai. I think we're already hoping to get 6,000 or 7,000 in Birmingham, which is really good and solid. And I think the success of Riyadh season has really lifted the general interest in boxing. So I think it's a good time. I think that sometimes there's too big a space between shows, and we just got to get the schedule right to make sure that there's regular activity and consistently big shows. We've got 4 or 5 amateur signings to announce in the next 2 to 3 weeks, as well as anywhere between 2 and 4 main event fighters as well that will feature in the early Q1 schedule. So yeah, we're pumped, we're motivated, and obviously when you have nights like tonight and you see that crowd, you realise that British boxing's still alive and kicking.
Eddie, James Regan from ESPN. Obviously the win was the most important thing for Jack tonight, but after that start, to see him kind of get a couple of knockdowns and turn the screws, how important was that going into a potential world title fight that he showed it on the biggest stage?
Yeah, I mean, when you're trying to grab a world championship fight, you want to look good and you want to be involved in exciting fights. So the first 3 or 4 rounds, I was kind of thinking, I don't want 12 rounds of this. We're in the entertainment business, but also it's difficult when you're in with a world-class operator that can really punch. You're not just going to start jumping in. And the knockdown kind of just kicked the fight into gear. And the last 6 rounds were very exciting. The 2 knockdowns were really big for Jack, not just in the fight, but just in the general momentum of trying to get that shot. And I think I said in the week, Jack punches a lot harder than people give him credit for as well. And when someone like Regis Prograis says he's the best fighter I've been in with, it's a pretty big compliment, really. And I thought he was great, Regis.
Eddie, James Shield, IS. In terms of, obviously, the result has progressed Jack's career, but in terms of his knowledge bank, what he'll have learned from that fight, what he's learned from the Taylor fight, how do you think that will have...
I think his IQ is really, really good. I think his jab is very underrated. I think his power is underrated. I think he can fight on the inside. I think he's tough. I think he's got a good chin. I think he's got everything. If I put him in with Teofimo Lopez, if I put him in with Devin Haney, if I put him in with Ryan Garcia, if I put all of those guys, I believe that he's in 50-50 fights with every top name in the division. Another fighter that I think is massively underrated is Liam Paro, honestly. And, Paro against Catterall is a very, very good fight. And I think it would be very unwise to rule him out in any fight against any 140-pounder. Because like you said, the knowledge bank of being in with top level guys like that. And one of the criticisms that Regis gave Jack, and I kind of get it, but at the same time, you can't just eradicate someone from your CV. He says, away from Josh Taylor, who have you beaten? He's like, well, I beat him twice. So you can't just, that's like saying, well, other than those 6 people on your resume, who have you beaten? So, but now he can add Regis Prograis to that as well. And he can add Jorge Linares, but we appreciate it was at the end of his career, etc. But, it's good to just keep putting that resume together. And, if he does fight Liam Paro, he's had 12 rounds against a top 5 southpaw in there tonight. So, he's going to feel like he's got all the experience to mix it with whoever comes next.
I had the Don Farrell Sporting News. TEOFIMO was obviously a dream fight, but it's pretty well documented that he has some fairly big purse demands at times. You talk about bringing him here to Manchester. Do you think that's viable, or is a TEOFIMO Lopez Jack Catterall fight maybe something that lands on a Riyadh season card?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've got to be a little bit careful because obviously we want to maintain nights like that, images like that, you know, where people see the atmosphere, see the crowd, and that's British boxing. So we can't just look to take every headline act to Riyadh season, but at the same time, the aim is to make sure the opportunities are there for Jack Catterall and he's financially rewarded for it as well. So I would like to keep Jack in the UK if we can. But it is unlikely for TEOFIMO to come to the UK, in my opinion. I mean, he's still blaming me for his George Kambosos defeat when we promoted the show at Madison Square Garden. So, I mean, if it went 12 rounds, I'd actually leave the arena before the scores were read out, if they fought. So, but I don't know what he's going to do. You know, he's obviously got that legal dispute with Top Rank. Is he going to move to 147? If he does, it could open up a vacant shot as well. But obviously, with having those two fighters fighting for the IBF on December 7th, that's a clearer shot, I think.
Eddie, just a reflection on the undercard as well. I mean, Pat McCormack, excellent. And then William Croller, I think, getting an incredible stoppage as well.
Yeah, I think that I'm really looking at that next era, you know, of fighters coming through. Because we talk about those headline acts coming to Riyadh season and stuff like that. When you've got Pat McCormack, when you've got William Croller, when you've got Cameron Bong, when you've got Hamza Uddin, I mean, there's so many of them coming through. And I thought William Croller was outstanding, very heavy-handed. Joe McGrail as well, great talent. Pat McCormack, outstanding fighter. And Janae Boston as well. You know, I think he can really fight. And he's 22. And, you know, when they did the interview about Ishmael Davis, sometimes I'm a little bit too much of a cat. I'm just like, just make the fight. And then Janae's like, I'm 22, I've got a lot of time, and he's right. But I love fights like that. But I think Ishmael Davis against Sam Gilly is a fight that I would love to see. If he can win a British title, the fight with Janae Boston could end up being a big fight in Yorkshire. And as I say...